guys, we are going to go over a quick review of the things that will be on our quiz here today. So let's look at our graph here. Remember, we want to identify all of our characteristics from our graph. So this first one is our direction. If we're looking at our directionality for our graph, here we have these two little down arrows, or we can see that we make a frown. And so our direction is going to be negative. So we have a negative directionality. Now, if we have a negative directionality, we know that our highest point on the graph is where our vertex is. And if we have a high point that we change direction, that means we have a maximum. So here we have a negative directionality and a maximum for our graph. Our next question here is our axis of symmetry. Now remember, symmetry means that we are going to cut something in half and it's going to be perfectly symmetrical on both sides. So let me go through here and I am going to take my red pen here and I'm going to cut our graph in half. Now, if I cut our graph in half here, I see that that line is our axis of symmetry. Because that line, they all have the same x values going up and down, we are going to say x equals. Because on that line, all of the x values are going to be exactly the same. Now let's count over to see what our x value here is. And that is negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So our axis of symmetry is x equals negative 7. Now our vertex is that highest point on the graph. So this point up here, it's where we change direction. So it's either that high point or that low point. So this is our vertex. And remember, this is going to be written as an ordered pair. So if we look here, we know our x value is the same as what's in our axis of symmetry. So our x value is negative 7 because we're over to negative 7 on that x value. And then on our y value here, we're up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as well. So our axis or our vertex here is negative 7, positive 7. So it's that high point on the graph. Now our next point here is our zeros. So we're looking at our zeros, our roots, our solutions, or our x-intercepts. So we're seeing where do we cross this x-axis. So we cross the x-axis in 2 points here. We also are going to write these as ordered pairs. So here are our zeros. We can say we have negative 1, 2, 3. So we're at negative 3 here. And then our y value is 0. And then over here, we're at negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Negative 12, 0. So our two zeros are negative 3, 0, and negative 12, 0. So those are our two x-intercepts. The final point here is our y-intercept, which is down here. We have our y-intercept. And this is where we cross, remember, our y-axis here. So that up and down is our y-axis. We know with our y-axis or our y-intercept, we have a 0 for our x value. And then it looks like we have a negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Negative 11 for our y value. So our y-intercept is 0, negative 11. So these are all the things we want to be able to identify from our graph. So we want to be able to look at that graph and identify those 6 things. So that is one of our 2.0 skills. Now let's jump over to another one of our skills here, which is identifying some of our factors and roots for our equation. So here, finding these zeros is what we're going to start off with. So remember, let's first identify our A, B, and C value. So here my A value is 1, my B value is negative 10, and my C value is 21. So we're looking for two things that multiply to 21, but add to negative 10. So we know because we want a positive that we're multiplying to, but a negative that we're adding to, we are going to have two negative numbers. So if I list out my factors of 21, I'm going to come to the conclusion that my two factors are negative 7 and negative 3. Those two things multiply together to get a positive 21, but add to get a negative 10. So here I'm going to write x minus 7, x minus 3. And remember, I have to set these equal to 0. So I'm going to say x minus 7 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. So now that I have these equal to 0, I'm going to go through and solve. So I'm going to add 7 on both sides here and get x equals positive 7. Add 3 over here and get x equals positive 3. So now I found my two zeros. I just need to write them in my fancy format, which is in my little brackets. So I'm going to say 3, 7. Remember, we want to write these in order from the smallest number to the biggest number. So here my zeros are 3 and 7. Now that is one of our 2.0 skills. Some of these other things are these 3.0 skills. And so I want to just run through them again, just so we have them fresh in our brain. If we are looking for our directionality, remember our directionality is our A value sign. So our A value here is positive, which means I'm going to have a positive directionality. Now, if I have a positive directionality, remember that means that my graph is facing up. So I'm going to have a minimum on my graph. Now, my y-intercept, axis of symmetry, and vertex, I do have to solve for. So, or not my y-intercept. My y-intercept I can figure out. Remember, our y-intercept is just our c value. So whatever our c value is, we just have to write it as an ordered pair. So I have a 0 for my x value and a 21 for my y value. My axis of symmetry here, I'm going to do this one in green here. So our axis of symmetry is going to be in green. Remember, this is where we have our equation, our formula of negative b divided by 2a. So here, I'm going to plug in my b value. So I'm going to put negative because that's what's in my equation. Then plug in my b value, which is negative 10. And divide that by 2 times my a value here, which is 1. Now, a negative times a negative is going to give me a positive. So I'm going to end up with positive 10 divided by 2, or 5 here. So my axis of symmetry is 5. But remember, we have to write it in our special format. So we're going to say x equals 5. So our axis of symmetry is x equals 5. Then remember, to find our vertex, we take our axis of symmetry and we plug it in wherever we see an x value. So we'll have 5 squared minus 10 times our new x value, which is 5, plus 21. Then this you can put in your calculator here. So I'm going to have my 5 squared, which is 25, minus 50, plus 21. And if I put that all together, 25 minus 50 plus 21 gives me negative 4. So this is the y value of my vertex. So if I'm writing my vertex here, I'm going to say I have a 5 for my x value, because that's what I have here for x, and then a negative 4 for my y value. So my final vertex is 5, negative 4. Remember, we want to keep that as an ordered pair. So these are all things that you might see on your quiz today. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, if you took notes during this, which I would encourage you guys to have done, you do get to use them on your quiz. So thank you for being diligent to those that were and took notes during this little review. You get to use those notes.